Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men Podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rinnie, and today we're getting mindful about fatherhood and in particular what it means to be an unstoppable dad. And joining me for today's discussion, I've got Matt Noonan from right here on the sunny coast. How are you going, Matt?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for coming. I'm really excited. This has been in the pipeline for quite a while now. I think we keep crossing paths, and I love connecting with locals here on the podcast. So it's good to finally have you here. But to introduce you to the Mindful Men community, you are a husband and father. You're also a coach of mind and body. A lot of what you do is the body, but I think it correlates nicely with the mind. And I love what you had on your Instagram handle, actually. You said you're helping career-driven dads build unstoppable bodies, minds, and relationships. So you are the ultimate unstoppable dad. So let's start there. Like, what does it mean to be an unstoppable dad?
It's been a journey to get here, right? And that's the thing, right? Like, fatherhood's a journey. Even though we're all kind of partaking in a similar journey of fatherhood, everyone's journey is unique. But when it comes to being an unstoppable dad, for me, the big thing is to keep going. Like, as a dad, as a father, as a man, like, we have to learn to be able to keep going. We have to keep pushing. We have to keep driving. For me, what unstoppable dad means is not only just keep going, but keep striving to be better, keep working to be better, and keep looking to improve ourselves. And that's kind of the whole underlying tone with being an unstoppable dad and being just unstoppable in life, is that it doesn't mean you have to be a Superman, because even Superman comes up against roadblocks, right? Like, he comes up against things that he has to work through. But the big thing is we keep going, we keep pushing forward, and we keep moving forward. That's the thing. That's the underlying message with the Unstoppable Dad Project.
So where did the inspiration, because this is your branding, the Unstoppable Dad Project, where did the inspiration come from to create this entity or this identity? And yeah, share that story.
Really, the inspiration is, so the word unstoppable, I mean, I've been a comic book nerd, for lack of a better term, for as long as I can remember, since I was a kid, right? Like, I used to read Marvel comics when they were just comic books. Like, I joke with the kids, like, my son's into the Avengers and stuff like that and all through the movies. And I joke with the kids, the only way we could get access to Marvel stuff was, you had to read it. You had to read it in comic books. And I think men of my age growing up with a lot of superheroes as people you kind of looked up to. So, you've got the Marvel comics. As it got a bit older, Dragon Ball Z, all things like that, where the heroes were always these unstoppable forces, right? It didn't mean that they didn't come up against tough times, but again, they just kept moving. Like, they became these unstoppable humans, or aliens or mutants or whatever angle you want to take. And they just kept moving. And the thing with the Unstoppable Dad Project is obviously, and where it came from, the big thing was the word unstoppable. Like, to me, that just meant that it's about trying to build momentum. It's about trying to keep going, right? And I know I keep coming back to that, but that's always been the underlying tone for me, because life's not an easy journey for a lot of people. But what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to keep going and keep driving forward and keep trying to put just one foot in front of the other every day. And some days that means we're going to be able to run. Some days it means we're going to have to take really short, steps to try and drive through whatever we come up against. But where it came about was, I guess, that love for comic books, that love for heroes, and really them being these unstoppable forces for good a lot of the times, albeit flawed forces for good, that kept moving and kept going and kept driving. And that's the word unstoppable was there. And then obviously, having become a father myself, it was pretty evident that, like, when I became a dad, there's all the emotions that go into it when you first become a father, right? Like there's excitement, there's uncertainty, there is this just overwhelming sense of, holy shit, like I'm now in charge of somebody else and I've got to provide for this person, and all these other feelings and emotions that we've got to go through. And we have to be our own version of unstoppable to get through that, to make sure that we're able to provide for our family and be there and be a present father and a present, man, a present husband. And just, we have to learn. And with those traits, when you become a dad, they have to be learned skills. It's not stuff, there's not an instruction manual. It's not stuff that we become equipped with. Hopefully we've learnt some of it throughout our own unique journey. But as, the whole just being an unstoppable dad is really just about keep going, keep driving, be better, like work to be better each day, work to be better each month, each year, as a father, as a husband, so on and so forth. But yeah, it all came about really just from my love of comic books and my love of superheroes.
I'm interested, like, 'cause we are recording in the middle of school holidays. And so that throws up a whole bunch of challenges as a father, like trying to navigate family, kids, keeping them entertained. My kids are over at the movies at the moment with their vacation care, which is really cool. I think my daughter was more excited about the bus ride there than the actual movie that she was going to go see. I'm interested, like, what's your kryptonite? Like, what gets you unstuck? What makes you feel like you're not unstoppable when it comes to navigating maybe a challenging period like the school holidays?
I guess time, and for me, one big thing for me is I never feel like I'm doing enough. I always feel like there's more to do. But that ties into having enough time, right? And especially during like school holidays, you've got kids, like, my wife's home today, so she's spending time with the kids while I'm kind of doing this and doing some other work. But it's always this time thing for me. Am I spending enough time with them? Am I spending enough time on the business? Am I doing enough of all the things that I need to? And it's a constant battle, right? Like you're always I feel like everyone that I talk to, and even with myself, like I always feel like I'm not doing enough. And sometimes you just need to take that time to center back and understand that I refer to them as seasons, right? Like we all have these different seasons in life where we're going to be able to do more of one thing or more of the other. And sometimes those seasons can be years on end. Sometimes they can just be weeks, like a period like the school holidays. So, one way I deal with that, rather than trying to put too much pressure on myself to do more, is understand like, hey, it's just the next 2 weeks. The kids are going to be back at school next week. So what's the biggest priority that I need to look at right now? Well, for me, and I get to set my priorities, they're not set by anyone else. And this is the factoring into that pressure to do more, understanding that it's on me to set those priorities and going, right now, the highest priority for me is to actually spend a good amount of my time and be able to enjoy that time with my kids, right? And that's it. Like that's number one priority. So everything else falls in line after that. It means that I'm going to spend a little bit less time on the business. It means that there's other things, maybe my activities that I do where I'm maybe not doing as much, because I want to be able to take the kids for a walk, go down to the beach, go down to the, speaking of the movies, like be able to go and see Kung Fu Panda 4 on a Tuesday. Like, things like that are important to me while they're on holidays, because I also understand that even to the thing of time, like this season with the kids, when both my kids are at school, like I've got one in year 3 and one in prep, like that's going to end pretty soon. Like my daughter's probably going to get to an age in the next maybe 3 to 4 years where she maybe doesn't want to hang around with dad as much on the school holidays. So I'm cognizant of that, like longer term thing that's going to happen, and being present here in what's going on now. So that's kind of how I deal with the time thing. And then the time obviously then feeds into that constant push in my, like in between the years where I'm like, I got to do more, I got to do more, I got to do more. And understanding like, hey, there's going to be a time where I can put the accelerator down on things, and it's up to me. I get to dictate when that is. I get to dictate when I get to put the foot on the gas and when I get to put the foot on the brake. And that's been a journey in itself to get to that point, and getting the skills where I can do that. Doesn't mean those feelings don't go away. It just means I'm able to deal with them when they come up.
I love that answer because as a small business owner myself, like I'm often sitting here at the desk, punching in the long hours, trying to get the business going, trying to get more referrals, trying to service the clients that I do have, trying to market, trying to admin, trying to do all of the things as a solo worker at the same time. But then the kids would often come in and go, Dad, can we go down the beach? Or Dad, can we go down the pool? Can we do this? Can we do that? And sometimes I'm like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. But I think it's more around perspective of where we should put the time. And do we really need to sit at that desk and plug away? Can we spend 1, 2, 3 hours with the kids, particularly, as you said, during these seasons in life where we need to actually invest that time because that time might not come back again? I was having the same thought the other day. I was looking at my boy Gussie, and he's in grade 2 and he's getting really tall. And I'm like, wow, you've shot up and you're one term into year 2. Next year's year 3 as well. So similar age to your kids as well. And I'm like, where is this time going? Like there was a period a few years ago when it felt like it was never going to end. All the sickness, the sleepless nights, all of the things that come with a young family. And now I'm like, we've gone past that and now we're into the next season, and now it seems to be flying a lot quicker than I thought. So time has been something on my mind more recently, and I'm like trying to say yes more to kids at the moment and just parking business, because business will, when they go back to school, I'll have that time for the business as well. So great point there. That's my kryptonite at the moment as well, is time. And so we introduce you as a mind and body coach, but you've been coaching for a long time. So I'd love to hear a bit about your background in coaching. I know you've had the gym business that you used to have and the PT business. Talk us a bit about your experience in coaching and supporting guys particularly to almost get more time out of their days.
So my coaching journey started about 16 years ago, and it actually started as a sports coach. So I played and coached American football since pretty much I was 17, and I was lucky enough to play and coach for both Queensland and Australia and coach on World Cups. And it actually started as a coach coaching the under-19 men. That was where my kind of passion for coaching, I guess, came about. And that's also why I tend to gravitate towards the word coach rather than trainer or anything like that, because that was my background. I did start as a coach, as a sports coach. From there, I loved coaching so much that I wanted to work out a way where I could make this my profession, right? So the easiest way at the time that I could see was to then go and do what I needed to become a personal trainer. So I undertook education from that point of view, and then ended up, during that process, we ended up opening a gym, which was about 15 years ago now. And I was lucky enough to run that gym for 11 years and continue to coaching football during that time. That was my full-time job. That was what I did day in, day out we had 11 years running the gym, and it was great. It was the thing with running a business, as you know, and as anyone who's a business owner listening to this would know, is when you do it for long enough, it's an education that money can't buy. You can't get what you learn from being a business owner from any degree, any certificate. Nothing can teach you what you will learn over that time, especially if you're like me and a little stubborn and boneheaded and made a lot of mistakes along the way. Like the things that I learned over that period were just, looking back on it in retrospect now, just second to none. And then during that time, I started the Unstoppable Dad project when we still had the gym, but it was a bit of a passion project because I struggled with, let's say, undiagnosed mental health issues as a young dad. And a lot of that was from, I look at it and I think it was less to do with being a father and more to do with actually being a business owner at that point, and just, again, struggling with not having the tools to deal with what was going on in my head and how to prioritize things properly was a big thing for me personally. But during that time, I started the Unstoppable Dad project, and eventually it kind of organically grew. I started the podcast, which for the last 3 years has just been a solo podcast of me just going through everything that I come up against as a husband, father, and also as a coach, like things I'm getting asked from my clients. And just the idea with that was really just to give out as much free information as I can, and tools and tactics and strategies that I'm either using myself or with people I'm coaching to try and get them through those times, all from the point of view of physical fitness. For me, that's always been the base, the grounding, and where I've come back to. And it's also something that I start a lot of my clients with, like, let's address this first, because I do think there's a big peace in if we feel better about ourselves, everything like the tasks that we're doing and we've got to come up against and things we've got to work through, the things we've got to really bring out that unstoppable dad for are going to seem a lot easier. But we ran the gym and the online business kept growing. We made the decision, it'll be 2 years ago this month, to step away from the gym business. And that was a very tough time. Like it was it was 11 years that I'd poured my heart and soul and life into. So to make that decision was a very hard one at the time. One in retrospect, I'm glad that I did. But that was a pretty dark time mentally and emotionally for me. And then I continued coaching, and now I'm still doing the Unstoppable Dad project, doing a lot of online coaching, but I'm also working with select people in person as well now too, because after having a bit of time off in-person coaching, I've seen that there was a lot of value in face-to-face, not over the computer, actually being in person with people, which is where we kind of got to today.
I'm interested because we crossed paths, I want to say about 2 years ago, and I think it's post-COVID as well. How did COVID impact the gym and then your online business as well? Did you find people gravitating more to the online, that just worked nicely? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, so when COVID first came around, so in March 2020, right, there was no choice but to go online. We preempted it a little, like we were pretty good with what, like I feel like we were pretty well prepared to transition people to online. No one was prepared for what kind of happened then, right? Like it was literally, I had friends that owned gyms that just had no infrastructure in place to transition people online. We had like a workout app because I was already doing a bit of online stuff. So the infrastructure was there. So we were pretty well equipped, but literally we had 70% of our revenue just drop out of our business overnight, like literally overnight. It wasn't a slow burn, which is just something that I don't think anyone's prepared for. So in the early stages, people had no choice, so they had to, right? And there was people running Zoom classes online. We tried to do that. We were doing like my approach with that now is kind of like we've got an app with instructional videos and things like that. I'll give you the workout and what I want you to do for the week. You use that as a check-in tool with me to make sure you're doing it. We'll do text message check-ins, but every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the person, we're doing a catch-up either on Zoom or in person to make sure that everything's going right. But that was kind of the approach that we settled on through COVID. And in the early stages, no one had any choice. That was it. That was what we had to do. But it was a massive impact on the business to start off with. And then with the online stuff, what then happened was, and this is a big realization for me, like online training from a personal training point of view is not for everybody. And this is something that you won't hear on the internet. The internet can be a very polarizing place, and there is a lot of great information out there, but there's also a lot of not great information. But online training is not for everybody. I actually think there's a certain personality type that gravitates towards that will succeed with it. Can you shift towards that? Absolutely. Like there's you can change to that, but this became evident to me during COVID, right? Because when people had no choice, there was people that excelled in the gym environment that you would see 3, 4, 5 times a week, like just meticulous with when they showed up, that couldn't adapt to remote coaching. Couldn't, and now there were a lot of other world factors going on there. Like that's probably impacted it a little bit. But then even as the thing burnt on, like 2 years on, like I could see this wasn't the case because people then had the option to come into the gym as well as work out at home. Some people decided to stay with the online workouts because they're like, hey, I like the flexibility. I like that I don't have to show up at a particular class time. I'm going to set up my own gym setup at home because then I've got like there's pros and cons either way. And again, I think you've got to understand your own priorities to work out what's going to be the best method for you to do that. But from the point of view of how COVID affected our business, it forced me to think outside the box. And we lasted through the worst of it. And we actually decided that we weren't going to do it when things cleared up a lot, which is different to a lot of people because a lot of people got kind of the nail got put in the coffin when everything got shut down. That wasn't the case for us. We did struggle through those 2 years, but looking back on it now, I can probably honestly say that that struggle was partially to do with environmental factors, but there was a good amount of things there where I'd mentally checked out. Like I'd had enough of it by that stage. Like COVID was the thing that tipped me over the edge where I was a little bit burnt out. Like I was sick of putting in all this time, had the business to a point where it was like, I'm coaching 10 hours a week. We're making good money out of this. Like finally took like 9 years to get to this point, and here we are. Then it's gone. I just never mentally had time to process that to get back to a point where I was back in it, like in the business properly. That was the thing for us. That was how it affected me personally more than it affected the business, because we could have continued to grow the business and got it back to a point where it was good and sustainable, but I never really mentally recovered until we were able to step away from it properly. But from the point of view of online training to in-person training, it really highlighted that one way or the other doesn't have to be for everybody. Like you can work out what's going to work for you, and everybody's different in what they need.
I was interested in that, like, because you mentioned losing 70% of your revenue, like pretty much overnight. And I'm sure so many businesses experienced that. So, and I was interested to see if COVID was one of those factors that made you realize, you know what, we're going to close the gym and so forth. And you said that was quite a hard and difficult decision. Like, did you find shutting the doors and closing up that aspect of your business, how did that impact your mental health as well? Because that would have been a huge decision. You've invested a decade of your life into that. How did you navigate that and then come out the other side?
To be fair, it probably took me a good year afterwards to actually get to a point where I was mentally in a place where I could think clearly about the whole thing. It was like, for lack of a better term, like there was a grieving process that I had to go through with it all. I was angry when I first made the realization that I did it. Like then I accepted it. And I guess this is maybe one of the downfalls of like the whole underlying unstoppable keep going thing, right? Like I just tried to keep myself busy the whole time. It wasn't until a couple of months afterwards where I actually stopped and I've gone, like it was just like everything decompressed, and I just gave myself time to unpack like the emotions that went with it, right? But the short answer is initially I didn't deal with it. Like I just tried to move on to the next thing and keep going. When I did actually deal with it, it was really just a process of me trying to work out what I actually wanted out of everything. We did this for a reason, and there was a bunch of reasons when we looked at there was external circumstances that impacted it. But the big reason was like, because I've gone, if we had to start again, would I be able to do it? And the answer to myself was, no, I don't think I've got it in me to do it. Like it's a lot of hard work, and I think I'm done. So coming back to that and realizing that was the reason. And then from there going, all right, what next? What do I want to look to next? Because that was the thing. Probably in that first 3 to 6 month period when I wasn't dealing with it, I was doing all this action without any direction on where I was heading, right? Like I was just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff to try and avoid what needed to be done, which was actually sitting down and going through, right, where do I want to go? We've done this for a reason. Like it's been a massive hit, and it's okay to feel upset about it. It's okay to, go through a grieving process, and maybe it's okay to take a couple of weeks where all I'm doing is I'm doing the bare minimum amount of work, spending time with the kids and playing a few video games. Like it's okay to do that. Like, and it wasn't until I gave myself that permission that I was able to get a clearer head and then look at what the next steps were going to be. Like, and that was, again, in fairness, like it was a 12-month process. It took a long time to get to that point. And that was actually when I then decided, hey, like I like coaching in person. There's a massive like need for in-person, not just fitness coaching, but mental health coaching. Like there's a big, there's only so much you can do in Zoom. You can't read body language. You can't see, all the non-verbal cues that are going on with somebody when you're trying to talk to them about things. And it wasn't until I let go of all that it was okay to start doing that in-person stuff again and kind of get this clear idea on, all right, this is the path forward. This is what I'm looking to do. There wasn't a clear path. It was just more, hey, I tried head down, bum up. I'm going to work through this and eventually we'll come out the other side. But it was the type of thing that all I was doing was avoiding what really needed to be done, which was, hey, you got to take some time. You got to decompress. You've got to like unpack everything that's going on here and work out what the next step's going to be.
I like that point where you said you gave yourself permission to deal with it. Because when we have businesses, and I'm only relatively new into the small business space, only the last couple of years. Before that, I worked for somebody else. And it is such a different dynamic. We're creating this thing, this beast of the thing. We can see the long-term potential. We can see the short-term potential. Ups and downs happen along the way, and those ups and downs can really throw us depending on what they are as well. I'm experiencing quite a few at the moment as we live in our resort. You know, we're not in a home, and the home business is now a resort business. And so there's a lot of downs at the moment for me. But I can see the long-term game. I can see that we're going to get there as well.
Sorry to interrupt, but there's one thing that I didn't say that I think is probably a really important thing to cover off, right? Like, and I think as like men and especially fathers, when we have to stop something, right? Like, and we have to finish up, especially when you've invested 10 years, you've invested a decade in your life, there's this element where you feel like a failure. Like, and that's like, I felt like an absolute failure when that happened. Like, and that was if with everything else, that was the hardest part for me to overcome, was that feeling that I had failed. Like, and I spoke earlier where I've gone like, hey, like the education that you get from that is like something that you just money can't buy, and gives you a perspective on things that unless you've done it, no one else has. But I didn't come to that conclusion. Like, I had to get past that and understand, hey, you haven't failed. It's been a learning process. It's been something that you've been able to do, and look at the positive. Like, I spent my whole 30s running my business, being able to spend as much time with the kids as I wanted to. Like, the kids grew up in an environment where they seen health and fitness all the time. And you know what? And I'm still coaching. Like, I'm still able to do that. Like, all the skills and tools that I've learned, I'm still able to continue to do. And in fact, like, you know, everything that I do now, I get to do from home. Like, I've got a little studio set up in the garage where I do like my PTs out of. And, you know, it's like one thing from a PT point of view. Worst thing is you get last minute, like I've got a bloke that I coach a couple of times a week. His young fellow ended up going to the hospital with a broken arm. Really shitty situation. In the past, like, you get these last minute cancellations for things that people can't control. You kind of get a bit aggro about it. And the reason why is like, then you've got to wait an hour for your next client. It's time that you're missing out with your family. Literally, if the kids have finished school and someone doesn't show up, I just walk in next door and I go and spend the hour with them and wait for the next person to show up. Like, but I wouldn't have got to that point had I have not gone through what I went through. So it wasn't a failure. It was just a transition to get to the point where I'm at. And I think that's one thing for a lot of guys that I talk to, and just a lot of men in general. Like, just because we've got to change the mode in which we make money or what we're doing from a professional point of view, especially if it's a forced change or it's like a hard 90-degree turn or 180-degree turn from what you've been doing. Like, it's not a failure if you've been able to learn something from what you've done, and not just are you not a failure if you've learned something from it? But, you know, there's a cliche saying like, you only fail when you quit, you know, and that's the thing, right? Like, I didn't quit. Like, we just pivoted. We just moved to something else. That's the thing. Like, that was probably the biggest thing that I had to mentally get over. And it's something that I hear a lot of. Like, I feel like a failure. Okay, well, understand that. And that's like, it's a very valid way of feeling. But let's unpack that a little more. Like, you know, if we've had to stop something, why did we have to stop it? What's the reason behind it? Because most of the time, if you have to stop something that's really important to you, it's probably a pretty like valid set of reasons why you've come to that conclusion in the first place. So let's look at it from that angle and see how we can pivot and keep using what we've learned from that situation and keep moving forward.
It's all about perspective, isn't it? It's like similar thing. I was talking to I've got a business wellness coach, which is a great initiative from the Queensland government here. We can access free wellness coaching from a business perspective for small businesses. And I've been saying the same thing to him. Like, I feel like a failure at the moment. I feel like we're living in this resort and we don't have a home yet, and I haven't got as many clients as I'd like. All these things that are getting me down, they're bogging me down in my mindset. But he's like, look at what you have achieved over those 2 years. Similar to you, look at what you have achieved over that decade. And then so once we start switching the mindset and the perspective on that mindset of where we're actually at, we can actually start seeing the glass as being half full as opposed to half empty, which is a big thing in terms of fatherhood, in terms of business, in terms of life. So I'm interested to jump into some of this mindset stuff that you do, because I have done a little bit of online coaching with you, and I was one of those guys, I'm going to put myself under the bus here, that online coaching didn't work for me. Like, it was I need that in-person stuff to keep me going. I need like that footy coach to keep me yelling at me from the sidelines, keep going, Simon, keep going. I don't really do it well with my own head. So maybe I'll hit you up on that in-person stuff now that you're doing that. But let's get into the mindset stuff, because I loved when we did work together a little while ago now, or quite a while ago now. I love that part about your coaching is the mindset stuff. So let's put into perspective context. Why is understanding our context and the situation that we're in important for us when we embark on, say, either a physical change or a mental change or a life change for us?
Because everyone's different. Like everyone is different, right? We'll use strength and conditioning as the vehicle here, right? Or we'll use fitness, training, whatever label you want to put on it. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different training history. Some people, when they come to me, have never set foot in a gym before in their life. They're 45 years old and they've never come to a gym before. Then you've got other people who are the same. They may have the same age, same amount of kids. Maybe they want to lose the same amount of weight. Like, they maybe have exactly the same goals, but that person played sport all the way up until they were in their mid-30s, and they've just fallen off the wagon for the last 10 years. They've been in a gym before. They're fairly familiar with it, but everything, like the two people presenting look exactly the same. But the context around those two is completely different, because we've got a different set of, the person who's played sports probably going to have a few more injuries that they're going to have to deal with, probably going to have a few more niggles, things like that. So we're going to have to factor that in. The person who hasn't done it, we've got to actually go through a process of teaching them how to move properly. So the approach, we can't take the same approach with those two people, because they're going to be at different stages of their training journey. So context is important from that point of view, because we need to know, from a training point of view, what's your injury history? What are your goals? Because if we're trying to get to two different places, if we've got the same map and with two different destinations, we're going to end up at the same place. But one of us doesn't want to be there, the other one does. What's your training history? Like, what have you done up until this point? Because what we've done up until this point matters as well too. It matters from the point of view of how you're going to respond to the training. It matters from the point of view of also the mental roadblocks that are going to come up as you respond to the training as well too. What is your relationship like? Are you here? And because this happens a lot too, like, hey, are you here with the support of your wife, or are you here and your wife doesn't really know that you're here? Have we had this conversation of, hey, honey, I'm going to go and train 3 times a week, and all that stuff matters when we're formulating a plan. Because if we don't have context when we're giving out advice, and again, I've been bashing the internet a lot on podcasts that I've been on and on here, and the internet can be a magnificent vehicle for a lot of things, right? But what gets clicks is polarity, being at the extreme ends of the spectrum. And the problem is, when it comes to life, when it comes to training, when it comes to fatherhood, there's all this gray area in between black and white that needs to be factored in. And most people don't fall at the ends of the spectrum. They fall somewhere in between. But a lot of people are taking advice for people at the end of the spectrum. And look, that doesn't mean that some of that advice isn't going to be applicable to you. Because a lot of what I've done and what I do with people, I've learnt from somewhere. But the big key to being a good coach, in my opinion, is to be able to take the ideas of others and move them into a way which is digestible for the individual, discarding the stuff that's not useful for them. And if I don't understand your individual context, and within context, like the value system that you're operating on, because if you come to me with with a goal that's the same as somebody else, but their value system and their lifestyle allows them to train 5 or 6 times a week, whereas yours only allows you to train 2 or 3, we can't use the same plan. But also too, the discussion might need to then move into, hey, let's have a look at how important this goal actually is to you, right? Because we can get you there, but these are the steps that it's going to take to get you there. And this is going to impact this, and it's going to impact this. We're going to have to take time away from here so that you can dedicate time to this. Are you okay with that? And then as an adult, you can go, you know what? No, this is like, okay, so let's have a look at something else that you want to work towards.
What about values? And you mentioned values there, and I love talking about values because it's very mindful practice. How do the values come into that? Like when you're sitting down with someone the first time and you're trying to work out what these goals are, how do you explore values?
Well, the problem is like most people, I don't think understand their values, right? Because they haven't taken the time to sit down and talk to them. And this, for me, inherently, this sometimes ties back into a lot of the issues that people experience, right? Because if we don't understand like our value system and our hierarchy, and you can unpack that as much as you want, like what's the number one thing that's most important to you? Most men with families are going to say my family, right? So things that go into looking after your family that most people perceive as work, I need to provide for my family. And not saying it's not important, it is important. But then going through a process with people of understanding how everything actually ties into it, because when it comes to, say, physical health, most people will go, looking after my family means the number one thing that I need to go after that is to provide for them. So I need to put everything I need into work. But then from there, like if we then put health like fifth or sixth down the line on our list of our priorities, there might be their own time, which is like, TV and things like that. And then health is all the way down the bottom. But then helping them understand how health not only ties into them being able to perform better at work, but then showing up more present for their family and their number one priority, it means that we then start to go through this process of let's put all these ideas down on paper and let's then start to work out how they all tie in together. Family is going to intersect with your physical health. Family is also going to intersect with your work. Your physical health is also going to intersect with your work as well, because it doesn't matter what type of work you do. We know, like people know inherently, the more physically healthy you are, the better you're going to be able to perform. It doesn't matter whether you have a physical job or you're sitting behind a desk all day. If you're more physically capable, you're going to be able to, in a better position to do that job. Therefore, putting yourself in a better position to provide for your family, and just really putting it all out on the table and letting people go, okay, so then when we start talking about time, we start, almost to the point where we'll put out a schedule, like we'll lay their schedule out. I'm at work from 9 to 5. All right. So we can't do what you do through your work hours. You're the professional when it comes to that. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. That time's blocked out. So outside of those times, when do we have? And then when we start looking at that, and it seems very regimented and very stale, and you don't have to continue to do this, but to do it in the early stages makes people see I can put aside 3 hours a week to go and train. Or if it's not going to train, it might be going and doing jiu-jitsu or playing a sport, going for a surf, doing something physical that's going to aid, help you move better, that's going to aid your mental health because it's your own time away. And people may actually find, hey, I've got 2 hours a week to go to the gym, and then I've still got another 3 hours a week to go for my surf and do all of that. And then I've got this time where I can spend with my family. I can do this, this is where I'm going to do all that. And then we've got some clarity around the action we need to take. And then from there, every time a roadblock comes up, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, or we've got to learn to say no to things as well too. We then refer back to our values and go, all right, where does this sit in our value system? And are we willing to take time out of a higher priority in order to satisfy a lower priority? And then for most people, the answer is generally no. So that's maybe something we've just got to put to the side for this season that we're in. Doesn't mean we're not going to be able to do it in 5 years' time, but for now, it's just got to get put to the side.
And when we make our decisions based on our values, they tend to stick a little bit easier as well. They make it easier to justify going for that 3-hour session during the week and then the surf or the jiu-jitsu or whatever it is. And I think the thing that was coming up for me is how do we value time as well? How do we value our time? And time in the sense of for ourselves, but also for our families as well, for our kids as roles as dads. How do we value that time? It comes back to that age-old thing with my kids come into my office and say, Dad, have you finished yet? And I'm often saying no, but trying to say yes more because I'm valuing that time with them before they get too old and don't want to have anything to do with me. So, which is, fast coming along the horizon. So great response there in terms of values. I love values-based work. And so I'm interested now, like you've sat down with someone, you're working with them on their plan. Are we looking at short-term fixes? Or are we trying to play the long game? What's your thoughts there?
Always for me, it's the long game, especially for, the type of people I work with and, obviously predominantly dads, but there's a lot of, most people, actually everyone I work with at the moment is a parent, whether it's mother, whether it's father, whatever the case might be. And the fact is, when we start being responsible for other people, our kids, our significant others or whatever the case, or when we have to consider other people, we can't be completely selfish in the endeavors that we do, right? Like if you're a selfish human being by nature, probably parenthood isn't the best path for you to take. It's just not going to work out that well for you and probably your child as well too. But when we've got those other things to consider, everyone's got a finite amount of time, but we can't push too many other things to the side in order to do it, which means that when we start talking about health, we need to look at long-term what we want to achieve. Like for a lot of people, that is as simple as being able to run around with the kids, be more active, like move pain-free, be able to get up and down off the floor without thinking that I need a Zimmer frame to help me up and down from there the whole time. Like these really simple things, but they're all long-term goals because if you can't do it now, not only do you want to get to a point where you are at that point, like say you're pain-free, you want to stay that way. So in order to stay that way, you have to think long-term because a saying that I use a lot, and it's not, I don't want anyone to think I'm smart enough to come up with this because I'm definitely not, and I've heard it from somewhere, but whatever actions, habits, and behaviors we use to get to a particular point, we have to continue to take those same actions, habits, and behaviors to maintain that point. So like, I'm not a weight loss coach and I don't profess to be, but weight loss is one thing that almost anybody that undertakes any form of training thing has some form of weight loss goal, right? And you get these really out there things where people are like, I want to get to single digit body fat percentage. All right. Like, so here are the steps that we're going to need to take to do it. Like, and if you want to do it, like in fairness, there's a lot of stuff that's going to have to get put to the side. But here's the thing, right? Even if you do all that to get to that point, you can take the foot off a little bit and maintain some similarity of that. But you can't drop back another 30% and then expect to stay there. So mentally then, how is that going to affect you if you go up and then we come down again? Well, I mean, the track record of people who have done some form of yo-yo thing to get to a point and then are almost mentally, for lack of a better term, broken and unable to really start back up something sustainable again, like it's astounding. The amount of people that I would have coming into the gym where it's the same old story of I've been up and down for 10 years and it's all relates back to like they'll do a 6-week challenge, they'll get this really good result, then they'll take their foot off about 20% and they'll stay consistent for another couple of months, but then the mental block of I did all this hard work to get to that point and now I can't seem to get back there gets too much for them. Everything gets thrown in a heap and they don't continue to do what they were doing, right? And then as a result, we end up slipping down, falling back to square one, and then we start the journey all over again. It's this up and down over a long period of time. So we know what happens when we go down that path. So everybody, I think everybody, regardless of where you're at in life, should be fixed on some form of long-term goal, right? Like one thing that I say to a lot of like fitness clients is like, hey, like everybody's end game is probably to try and keep themselves out of the nursing home for as long as possible, to be as independent as you can for as long as possible. So what do we want to do with that? Well, number one thing is we want to get consistent with some form of strength training. So consistency sometimes is going to look like 4 or 5 times a week. Sometimes it's going to look like 2 times a week. Sometimes it's going to look like 3. On average, I think 3 is a pretty good number for most people to aim towards. But in order to get some satisfaction out of showing up like 3 times a week long term, we have to have our eyes set on the future, on the long term. Now, that's not going to get us amazing results over a 6-week period. It'll get us results, especially if you're coming from doing nothing. Like you'll see a good level of results in that first, say, 12 weeks. But we've also got to understand how to implement those things in a sustainable way, in a way where they don't impact other things or have a heavy impact. Everything's going to always have an impact on other values when you change a behavior. It just is. There's no way that you can implement something new and it not impact other areas of your life. What we're hoping for is they get impacted in a positive way, but there is going to be some form of like negative impact. We're maybe going to have to pull back a little bit of time over here to bring it over here. And we're moving the dials up and down to get it to a point where it's sustainable for us. But then all of a sudden, we keep doing that, but the focus is just to keep showing up, just to keep showing up. And then all of a sudden we shift this mindset, this mentality over, I'm trying to go to the gym to I am somebody who goes to the gym, or I'm somebody who trains. Like the biggest, I guess, self-talk that I see when, I know when people have kind of hit their stride and they're focusing on this becomes part of their identity. So it's I am rather than I'm trying to, like they are somebody who trains rather than it's like, I'm trying to get better at going to the gym. But it's all long-term, because at the end of the day, especially the age group of people that I'm working with where we're, 35 plus, everyone's starting to think long-term. I think once we have kids, it automatically forces our focus to that long-term because we want to be there when they're 18 and 21, they decide to get married, be there for their wedding day. If you've got a daughter, be able to walk her down the aisle, like all these things, they're all long-term things. But we don't want to get to the point where it's a week out from that event. We've got our knees are completely shot and it's the point of no return. If we start doing it now, we don't have to do this crazy 6-week crash in order to get to the point. We just keep rolling on what we're doing and we keep moving forward.
It's like maintaining our cars. Like as guys, I often say this in my own therapy clinic, like therapy is like going to take your car to the mechanic. It just fine tunes it, keeps the car on the road as long as possible. It's the same with, working with someone like yourself. It's if we do it for the long term, we're not looking for those short term fixes, we can stay more active and more present for longer and longer and longer. And I look at that with my folks, like they had pretty bodily taxing jobs and so forth, but compare that to my wife's parents who are a bit younger, probably by a decade, so they've got time on their side, but also they were a lot more active through my wife's childhood and their siblings as well. And you can certainly see that their ability just to navigate life is a little bit easier and compared to my folks as well. And there's nothing on my folks. They had a very stressful jobs and did what they could. But I think you're right. The earlier we can get into the long-term game, and I'm thinking about this now as I've turned over 40 last year, is I'm always thinking about the kids and wanting to be active with them and present with them and do all the things with them. I don't want to end up, saying no because I physically can't do it. And so I think this is a great perspective to have. It becomes part of your identity as well. Not that I'm just doing this, but I'm living this. This is part of my value system as well. Matt, I love talking about this physical health and mental health with you because you intertwine it so beautifully. You're not just about reps, you're about an image and all this type of stuff. You're about the holistic game. So if anyone's listening and they're like, oh, I want to check you out and do some work with you, like how can they find you? Give us a plug on the business and share it with the world.
So you can jump on social media as much as I've been bashing it. That's one of the main vehicles I've been using for growing my business. So if you find the Unstoppable Dad Project, so it's at the Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, the Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. You can shoot me a message on there. It's obviously got clips of the podcast. It's got links to the podcast on there as well. Also, if you want to check out any of the gym, like more specific training stuff that we had, Fusion Performance is on there. I'm starting to fire up that profile again just because I am finding that I am getting requests to work with more people outside of just dads. So that's going to be the training program. And then the Dad Project is a little bit more of a holistic view, physical, mental well-being, and really focusing on that side of things through. And then again, just through the podcast, trying to give out as much free information as I can. I've been lucky enough where through the gym and through the podcast, like I've been putting out content in some way, shape or form for probably about 8 or 9 years now. So there's plenty of me on the internet if you want to look in the deep, dark reaches of it, just from a training point of view and going through all that. But yeah, the Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook and Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me. And then one thing with we'll just say before you finish off is the big thing with me when it comes to coaching, like, and everyone says this, right, where they're like, I don't work with everybody. I truly don't work with everybody. Like I've been doing this for long enough now that I know who I work really well with. And after a discussion, if I don't think what you want to achieve is going to be a good fit. I know enough people that I'll direct you in the direction of somebody who is going to really be able to help you. So if you've got any questions at any point, I'm more than happy just to give out free advice based off my experience. So yeah, if anyone needs to and wants to reach out, please feel free to.
Yeah. Do you work specifically with just Australians, or do you go globally because it's an online business?
I don't have any clients globally. I'm well and truly equipped to. It's just been that the business has kind of grown organically within this great country that we're in.
So that's good to know, because this podcast reaches globally, much like your podcast. So I'm interested for you to plug your podcast. What can we expect? I love watching some of your videos on YouTube as well. Share for the audience what they can expect from the podcast.
So I've been doing the podcast now for the last 3 years, and really it's just been me talking into a microphone for about 15, 20 minutes every week, just picking a topic that has come up for me, whether it be in my life or it be a question that I've been asked from a client, and just how we've addressed that, the things that have gone through it. And just like my goal with those 15 to 20 minute podcasts is that everybody walks away with some form of usable information that if they want to implement it in their life, they can. If they're coming up against the same issue or problem, here's 3 things. Here's one thing that, we did that was effective. So that's been the goal with the podcast. What I'm excited to do over the next kind of 12 months is I'm a little bit intermittent with the podcast at the moment, just because I'm going through the process of getting set up to have people like yourself on there, where we can do a little bit more of an interview style of what's going on, and hopefully pick some experts' brains or just other dads' brains on things that have worked for them in their life, because again, everyone's different. Context is important. What you're going to get out of something that I say, you might get one little thing, whereas something that Simon says, it might be, you might get 3 or 4 things out of that. And then you take that, you build your own approach, and then you're hopefully able to succeed and keep thriving from there.
It sounds really exciting. I'm looking forward to see the guests come on and sharing their expertise. Hopefully get myself on there and give a plug to Buy for Bed.
Absolutely.
But Matt, I could talk to you all day, and we are only just down the road, so we do need to catch up
for sure
far more frequently than just at the vacation care or childcare pickups. But before I let you go, and we're going to put all the links in the show notes, so if anyone wants to touch base with you, they'll be able to easily do that through the show notes, I always finish the show with asking my guests to plug something that makes them feel good. So each episode, we go through a whole range of things, and we've talked on mental health and physical health today, but I like to leave it on a slightly lighter note. So something that you're watching on telly, you're listening to, you're reading, a self-care activity, something you're doing with the kids in the school holidays. What's lighting you up at the moment?
I've got lots of things that light me up, so I've got lots to choose from. I mean, I'm going to plug this, and I do it all the time on the podcast, but jiu-jitsu is just, that's my jam. Like I've done it for 8.5 years, and it's cliche. Everyone says it. It has truly been a life-changing experience, and it is one of those things where if you are physically capable and able to do it, and again, jiu-jitsu can be done by everybody, but it's not necessarily for everybody. So if anyone has any questions about it, please hit me up. But it's mostly men, like it's a male dominated thing. So you're getting a community of people. And if you've ever played team sport, there's a lot of people that are ex-team sport players, whether it be recreationally or professionally, that tend to gravitate towards this, because even though it's an individual sport and it's a martial art, especially contact sports, you're getting physical contact. So you're actually exerting yourself physically, but you're also getting a community of people to be around. And it's going to attract very like-minded people. So you're getting around a community of other men, which is something that I think a lot of people lack, as you would probably attest to. But then you're also getting the physical side of it, you're getting the mental side of it, and it's hard, especially in that first little while. And I think when you go through tough times, having something that you're doing and I sometimes walk out of there and think to myself, why the fuck am I still doing this? This is crazy. I'm a 41-year-old man, and I'm going and wrestling and trying to strangle my friends in my spare time. But it's because it's hard, and you do it. And I do it in the morning. I do it 3 times a week in the morning. And then something hard comes up, and it almost makes you think, well, this isn't anywhere near as hard as what I had to put myself through this morning. So it helps you build up a little bit of resilience, but it lights me up. I love doing it. My son's just started doing it too. I think he's doing it more so because he's seen dad doing it, but it's just if you find the right place, and I'll give them a plug because if you're on the Sunshine Coast, but Legacy Jiu-Jitsu on the Sunshine Coast, I've trained with them now for 6.5, 7 years, and they're fantastic. The people there are great. The instructors are great, really, really high class coaching, which obviously I know a little bit about, but that's the thing that has done and continues to light me up outside of obviously spending time with my kids, which is, I'm sure it's the same with most fathers.
I'm interested. Before I let you go, I want to just touch on that because I've been thinking, what can I do with my son? And at the moment, I'm trying to coach his soccer team. It's really hard when you've got a whole bunch of under sevens just going around doing whatever they want. But like, what was it like, taking your son in to do that with you, like as a father-son type duo?
So I don't do it with him. And here's why. And this is my thing. I'm dad, I'm not coach when it comes to my kids. And the other thing is too, when it comes to sport, I've had my journey. And I've been lucky enough, like I've never played anything professionally, but I got to play at a decent level of the sport I chose to play. I got to coach at a decent level of the sport I chose to coach. So when it comes to me coaching my kids, I'm not interested. I'm dad, I'm not their coach. So he's been at me to do it since he was 3 years old because it's just I've done it for as long as he's been born. So he knows nothing different. Like he'll come and he'll sit down when I've done it. But I literally take him. The coaches that are there who are amazing, they're just there. They take them off. They do the session. He does his session. We talk about it afterwards. Did you enjoy it? Like my favorite thing to ask the kids when like they come home from school is, what was your favorite part of today? That's the number one thing I ask them every day. Come home from school, come home from sport. What was your favorite thing that you did? What did you enjoy about it? At 4 years old, I'm not having a conversation with him about what he can improve and what he can do. The thing that we do, because he likes to do it, like we've got some mats at home in the garage. He'll want to wrestle, but it's not structured. It's just play. Like it's not, but again, I'm wrestling him as his dad. I'm not wrestling him as his jiu-jitsu coach. Like for me, I've had my time coaching. I've had my time playing. My journey as a sporting father, if my kids will do sport because it's something that I'm going to, but they'll get to choose their vehicle. They'll get to choose what they do. But I don't want to be coach. I want to be dad. Like I'm there to support their journey. I'm not there to influence it. And that's all. That's my take on it for now. That may change later on. But when it comes to jiu-jitsu, I want it to be as much his thing as it's mine, and me like being part of that, like coaching him in that. I think that then makes it my journey rather than his. So yeah, that's kind of my philosophy on sports and coaching. But I like doing it because it's something I can do. Like we're doing it, even though we're doing it separately, and he'll do it and he'll do his class, and then we can have a talk about it, and he'll come to me with questions and say, I did this and this and this. And it's nice because I've done it, so I know what he's talking about. Like, and that's the thing. Like that's the level of why it's nice as a father-son to do it, not because I'm not trying to turn him into, the next Alex Volkanovski or anything like that. I want him to do it for the sole enjoyment of it. If that takes him somewhere where he's going to be able to excel at it, great. I'll do everything in my power to make sure I'm supporting him in that journey. But for me, I'm not coach, I'm dad, and I want to stay that way.
I love it. I am often contemplating that in the middle of soccer training, trying to navigate there's 10 of them on this under sevens team. I'm like, why am I doing this?
I could imagine that'd be like herding cats.
Herding cats on a hot tin roof.
Yeah.
But Matt, thanks so much for coming on, having a chat with me, getting mindful about fatherhood. I really love our discussions. And for anyone who's interested, I'll be putting the links to all your details in the show notes so that they can touch base. So Matt, thanks so much.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.